Welcome to another episode of Seeing Them Live, a podcast featuring memorable concert stories from live music fans. Everyone has a concert story, and hopefully, one day, we'll hear yours.
And so we're out there for so long, to a point where my friend says, "You see that guy over there with tickets?" I say, "Yeah." And he goes, "So here's my plan. I'm going to jump him and try to take the tickets, and the security guard's going to shoot me, and that way I don't have to deal with the shame and humiliation of losing these tickets." Which I said, man, at this point, I'm up for anything. Go for it.
My guest today is Victor Gurbo. Victor is a singer-songwriter, artist, and guitar builder from Brooklyn. In 2013, Victor participated in the Battle of the Boroughs at NPR's Green Space, where his band went on to win the title of Best Band in Brooklyn. Since then, Victor and his band have played at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, Carnegie Hall, and many other venues throughout New York City. He performs with an electric Americana backing band and as an acoustic act. On March 11th, Victor released an album called Gurbo and Company Live 2025, recorded last year at New York City's Cafe Wa. Victor, welcome to Seeing Them Live. I would also like to thank Igor Resnick from 1K Music PR for setting up this interview.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I'd also thank Igor Resnick from 1K Music PR for setting up this interview with you today.
Yeah, and also the next time Mad Meg's playing, which is a band that he's a part of, I highly recommend checking them out. My best live concert experiences have been at their shows. They are out of this world. I love them.
We'll bring those guys up a little bit later here in the interview, but yeah, I like their music as well. So I thought we'd start with some of your concerts and then move into your guitar building, making,
Sure,
and your music course. So your first concert was one that you don't remember because you were like 9 years old.
I was nine. It's funny, for this, when I was chatting with Igor, he said, "Did you respond yet?" And I said, "I'm still doing research. I'm still trying to figure out when the show was." It was 1997. It was in Martha's Vineyard. It was in an old church. And my memories of it are touch and go. But I do remember that at that point, when I was younger, there was a handful of songs that I insisted get played in the car, probably ad nauseum, to a point where my parents, I'm sure, regretted exposing me to them. And one of them was City of New Orleans, which I know he did not write, but he played and made famous. And so I stayed awake. I caught that song, and apparently I dozed off at one point and then came back online when he did Alice's Restaurant. Yeah, I don't quite remember all of it, but the pieces that I do recall, actually where our seats were, it was the space that led onto the stage. So we got to speak with him briefly before he went on, which I remember being really neat, and always loved his work. He's a fantastic artist.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I'm sure if I was at the show now, I would like to think I wouldn't have fallen asleep. I'm sure that I would not have. And that was by no means an insult to Arlo, but I managed to go on a website, and thankfully it went back that far. A lot of the links and stuff were glitchy, but I found the show, and the month was scrambled, but I found the year. So I was happy to do some archaeological internet digging and uncovered the show.
Yeah, sometimes find some interesting things out there when you're looking around. So you're a Bob Dylan fan. I think you're wearing a Bob Dylan shirt right now, aren't you?
I am. Got that at one of his shows.
So when you were 17, and this was 2005, at the Beacon Theater, Victor, you saw your dad and one of your dad's friends took you to the show.
Yeah. A close friend of my father is a diehard Bob Dylan fan, and I had recently been diving into his catalog. And I don't recall this either, but apparently when I was a baby and I wouldn't stop crying, my father, to rock me, he would just play whatever CDs he had lying around. And it was the Traveling Wilburys, Congratulations. That was the only one that stopped me from screaming uncontrollably. He said, my eyes popped open, I started buzzing around the room, and then I would eventually calm down and go to sleep. So I've been pre-programmed from a very early age to like Dylan's work. And I remember we were traveling upstate. We were going up to the Catskills as a family, and my dad was flipping through the radio, and You're a Big Girl Now came on, and I just kind of perked up, and I said, "What's this?" And he said, "This is Dylan's Blood on the Tracks." And after that, I stole whatever CDs we had lying around the house, and I would just constantly play them on the Walkman. And when Dylan was coming around, he suggested we go. It was a great show. Amos Lee was the opening act, who I was unfamiliar with at the time, but it was a really great show. And I liked his comment where his first album had just come out. And he said, this is the lamest thing I could possibly do on the same stage as Bob Dylan and Merle Haggard, but I'm going to direct you to the merch station that buy my CD. And we did. And I'm glad that we did. And Merle was great. I'm really glad that I caught him before he passed. And then Dylan, who I have seen probably, I was trying to do the math before I got on this podcast, but probably about between 20 and 30 times now. Every time he comes around, I try to see him. So yeah, it was before I knew his entire catalog. So there were certainly songs that, like, I had his MTV Live album around the house, but I didn't have his Highway 61 album. So when he played Highway 61, I said to my dad, what's this? And he said, oh no, we have to go to the store after this. But actually, ironically, he played John Brown at that set, which his only studio version was the MTV Unplugged. So I actually knew a song a couple other people didn't, but it was a great set. And that was when he was on the electric piano. Shortly after that, he transitioned to, he was on the Korg CX3 for a while, which is a Hammond clone, and those sets were great. I love him on that because it just gave all the sets this sort of fun carnival feel, for a lack of better words.
Yeah, because you make that distinction. Some of your best Dylan shows were when he moves to this organ.
Yeah. So I think that's before, I think he switched off that in 2014 or 2015. Stats is still great. I'm still thrilled to catch him, but I called it iPod Shuffle Dylan. His sets are now much more static. The songs, consequently, much more rehearsed. But I really enjoyed the sort of jam band. You never knew what you were going to get. He usually ended with the same 3 songs, but he would bust out. When I saw him once, he came out and he did Tomorrow's Not a Long Time. And I don't think he'd done that song in years. And that was just the joy of not knowing what you were going to get.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that. I had other guests on that kind of the seeing bands, the unknown was what the excitement is a big part of. But then you also listed Levon Helm. You'd seen him, I think, said maybe a couple times, perhaps.
I think about 5 or 6, I want to say. I caught him at the Beacon, I think 2 or 3 times. I should have done more digging, but I guess saying it's an opposite energy to Dylan is not quite accurate because obviously Dylan's been touring since 1988. So he certainly isn't doing it for his health. He certainly loves being a part of the interaction between the audience and the performance. But whenever I bring a friend to catch him live, I always say, don't expect him to interact with you. Don't expect what you get with a lot of veteran artists. He's going to do his new stuff. He's going to do what he wants to do. And you either accept it or you don't. But Levon Helm, he loved the interaction with the audience. And you could feel that right away. I know that from listening to a couple of documentaries and podcasts and stuff, that when he was touring with Dylan early on, that he apparently quit because of the booing, because he just felt it was such a negative interaction between him and the audience, which I get from seeing him. He loved it. And considering when I caught him after his cancer battle, I think he was just so thrilled to be there. And it showed in the music. And I also loved that he would always bring artists on stage who kind of hadn't been around for a while. He had Phoebe Snow come out once, and I think it was right after her daughter had passed away. I don't exactly remember how long before she came on, but she had kind of left the limelight. And this was her first performance back on stage, I think, in many years. And I remember she shuffled out as soon as he introduced her, and she just said, oh my God, the Beacon. And she seemed so timid and scared, and then belted out this version of Piece of My Heart that just would put anything to shame. And I certainly think that he had a fondness for artists like himself who kind of were getting a second chance to be there for audiences. And it's funny, when you had mentioned in the other podcast, I hadn't thought of that story in a long time, that the last show that I caught of Levon Helm's was at Terminal 5. And I looked it up. It was January 7th, 2010. And he had a throat polyp that came back, and he wasn't able to sing for a bit. But he had an incredible backing band with his daughter, Amy Helm, who is incredible singer in her own right, an incredible performer. And he started the song and he couldn't get through it. And he just got in the middle of the stage and started dancing. And everybody loved it. And it's just that showmanship of just pushing through. Yeah, losing him was a real loss, I think, to the Americana world. And I also caught, it was in Jersey, there was a memorial show for him, and an artist that I caught there, who was another performer that I wish that I had seen more, was John Prine, and he got to play there. And I remember him coming out on the stage, and there was an equal sort of hush of reverence. And it was great to see him. He's another artist that I wish was still here.
Yeah, that's so cool because you can really tell when the performer's connecting with the audience, and they'll cut you a lot of slack too. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I've seen one time U2, Bono lost his voice. I think it was the second night they were playing, and like halfway through the concert, and nobody cared. He told the crowd, "Will you all help me sing?" And everybody cheered, and they knew every word to every. This is like 1984, 85, something like that. Yeah, the place went like totally nuts. It was almost better. It was really something special.
This is something that I always try to remember as a performer too, which is that the audience doesn't want you to fail. They really don't. So all of those moments when you feel like you're screwing up so bad, they're there with you and they want you to feel good just like they want to feel good. So I have a story. When I did my show at Carnegie Hall, there was a moment in one of the songs that we did towards the end, one of the two songs that we do at the end of every set. And we had prepared as much as we possibly could. And my lead guitarist's pedal board somehow cut power and restarted. He's got this really sophisticated system and his sound completely cut out. And so then he turns to me and he kind of goes, "Oh no." And then I turn to the keyboard player and I say, "You got to take it." And then he does a solo. And then by the end of when he had gone around, the lead guitarist had plugged the system back in, restarted it. He pointed, he said, "I got it." And I signaled to the bassist and the drummer, "We're going around again." And then he got to take his solo. He went back into the song and the crowd went nuts. And afterwards, I was talking to somebody, said, "That was scripted, right?" And I said, "No, no." And I said, "Oh, that was my favorite part of the show." And I was completely blown away because my heart's in my throat. And I'm like, good God, this is the biggest thing that we've done to date. And something went wrong. But they like seeing a group of people bounce with it. I think makes it really organic. It reminds you that it's not just you're listening to a track, that it's a real experience and that you're there. Well, those are the best shows.
Just get back to Dylan just for a second, Victor. I wanted to touch on this Terminal 5 show you were at. You pulled down one of the paper notices from the concert. That's so cool.
Yeah, Dylan, he hates getting his picture taken. He always has. And I would argue he's allowed, he's Bob, he can do whatever he wants. I saw him last year at Jones Beach. He was part of the Outlaw Tour with Willie Nelson, which was a great show. And if they do that again this year, I highly recommend. If it comes near you, catch it, because Willie Nelson's turning, 93 this year? And I got to say, his performance was out of this world. He's certainly older, but again, going back to the audience wants you to succeed. He was doing some lead work on Trigger, and the solo, like it ended, there was nothing wrong, but like the phrase didn't end where it would have if he had done it the way that he wanted to. And he just kind of looked at the camera and shrugged, and we all kind of went like, yeah, well, it sounded good to us, and we're thrilled you're here. But Dylan always has the cameras turned off. And now, of course, he's touring, and he usually wears a big cowboy hat and an outfit and a suit, sometimes has swords and patterns on them. And now he's wearing a hoodie pulled up as much as he can. So he does not want the picture taken. And in his argument is that it's all about the experience of the show. There's one footage online where at one point someone's taking pictures very close to the stage and he actually stops the show and says, "We could either play or pose. Which one do you want?" And he stops and he kind of strikes a pose and lets them take a picture and then goes, "Okay." And they put the camera away and he goes back to play. And, again, it's not what I do as a performer, but I certainly understand that it does make me more present. So when we walked into Terminal 5, there was a bunch of just on basic 8.5 by 11 printer paper at the request of the artist, no photos. So I was eyeing them the whole time. And then the last night, as everybody was shuffling out, I pulled one off the wall and I have it framed over my bed. And I say it's jokingly my most authentic piece of Bob Dylan merchandise memorabilia.
Yeah, because I always saved my ticket stub from concerts, and now you rarely get them. So, yeah, anytime you can pick up like some sort of oddity, like what you just described, is really cool.
Yeah. When you asked that question on the forum when I checked in, my first thought was, I don't think I've gotten my hands on a concert ticket in years. And certainly as a performer, half the time. As someone attending shows, as someone who is performing, there's many moments when having physical tickets would just make everything so much easier. Although that might be a perfect segue to my Jack White story.
Yes. Let's do it. So under disappointing, and sometimes I don't report disappointing because I don't want to be a buzzkill on here, but yeah, I think this is a pretty good one. Jack White, Radio City Music Hall. He played a couple of shows, September 29th and 30th. This was 2012.
I was the 29th.
This is part of his Blunderbuss tour. And yeah, so go ahead, Victor.
Sure. So at that point in my own development as a performer, I was much more interested in acoustic material. I was not really plugged into anything current, much to my own detriment. And I had a close friend who was very big into Led Zeppelin and a lot of more contemporary rock acts. And we sort of bonded over Jack White because of Jack's covers of Ball and Biscuit and a number of other ones in there. He does some Mississippi John Hurt tunes now and then. And when he was coming around for the Blunderbuss tour, if I'm not mistaken, he hadn't played in a while. So it was very exciting. And my friend said, "Do you want to go?" Absolutely. And he said, "I'll be in charge of picking up the tickets." And so he, of course, logged on the morning that they went on for sale, but they all got bought immediately. So he had to go on to StubHub. And he got the tickets. And I live in Bay Ridge, and I met him. Was walking, our subway stop was in between our houses. And I see him walking down the block, and he has the FedEx envelope that the tickets came in. And he's winging the envelope animatedly as he's walking down the block. And the first thing I say when I see him, I say, "My friend, you're going to lose the tickets if you do that." And he proceeded to put the envelope on top of his head. And he said, "I'm not going to lose the tickets." So, of course, you know where the story's going. We get on the train. We're speeding along. We get there. We got there early because we wanted to catch the opening act. We wanted to not have any stress or any problems. And we hung out for a while. I think we grabbed a drink. And we get to the front, open up the envelope, and there's no tickets. I said, "You're joking, right?" And he goes, no, they're gone." So we immediately backtracked in the line as if that's where they got lost. And no, we couldn't find them. We ran all the way back. We retraced our steps. There was no luck. And he said, "Well, don't worry. I bought insurance. I bought the tickets online. We'll be able to get in." So, of course, he calls up Ticketmaster, and Ticketmaster says, "Well, you got these on StubHub. You got to deal with StubHub." So we're sitting outside Radio City, and he's calling, and we'll get somebody on the phone and explain the problem. And they go "Oh, okay, we'll transfer you to blah, blah, blah department." And then another 20 minutes goes by, another 10 minutes goes by, another 30 minutes go by. We're sitting there and we keep getting transferred to people. And every time it's "No, please don't leave us. Please tell us what to do. The show is going to start soon." And so we're out there for so long, to a point where my friend says, "You see that guy over there with tickets?" I say, "Yeah." And he goes, "So here's my plan. I'm going to jump him and try to take the tickets, and the security guard's going to shoot me. And that way I don't have to deal with the shame and humiliation of losing these tickets." Which I said, man, at this point, I'm up for anything. Go for it. And so finally we get through to somebody and they say, "Oh, well, there's an off-site StubHub location, 20, 30 blocks from where you are. You should go there and they'll help you out." So we hop in a cab and we go there. And there's one other person online in front of us who actually had the same problem as us. Ironically, it wasn't as comical as our situation. So then he leaves and a person behind the counter is saying "Well, the show's already started. We don't have access to your ticket number." But they flip open this big book and they say, "Because you have insurance, you can go to any of these shows under this credit with this amount of money," and we're kind of despondently looking through. And this guy comes out from the back who was our guardian angel for the show. And he says, "Listen, kids, here I have 2-row BB tickets. I just spoke to the door. He hasn't gone on yet. If you take these and run, don't tell anybody. They're not claimed. Just take them and go and enjoy the show." And I said, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah, leave now. Don't think. Go." So we hopped in a cab and we bolted back and we get in and we're being led in. I believe it was the first song. I thought it was. Of course, in my memory of things, it was less songs than he actually did. But we're being led down the aisle and I remember seeing where our seats would have been. We're all the way up in the front row BB. So there's the orchestra pit's in front of us. Michael J. Fox is in front of us to our right. And I saw some members from Saturday Night Live. They were over in the far left. And you could see the spit coming off the stage. You were that close. I spoke to the guy next to us. I think he'd paid about $1,000 a seat for him and his wife to go there. So we went from having crappy tickets to no tickets to now all of a sudden we're way up in the front.
Yeah.
And as the show's going on, Jack White, he doesn't seem happy. At one point between the songs, he says, "What is this, an NPR concert?" And trying to get everybody to cheer. And of course, I am just so happy to be there. I was screaming my lungs off. I am so thrilled. And at the same time, there's somebody trying to take pictures in the front. And mid-solo, he's stopping and waving his hands, stop taking pictures. And I'm like, something's weird. And again, between the songs, he seems upset. He's trying to egg the audience into cheering more, and then he finishes a song, which I'm pretty sure was Ball and Biscuit. According to my notes over there, yeah, it was. And he says, "Thank you so much." And he storms off stage. And from looking at it online, again, I thought it was a half an hour. It was actually about 50 minutes. But at that point, he was doing, I think it was like 22 to 25 song sets. So we were thinking, okay, at that point, he had an all male band and an all female band. So I thought, like, okay, maybe he is switching the bands out. And we're waiting and we're cheering and we're cheering. And the lights aren't going back on. And this is weird. This is weird for an encore. It's a weird spot in the set and it's a weird moment. And it's taking much too long. And then all of a sudden the lights come back on and everyone's getting really pissed. I think I read afterwards that I forget which news source it was, but it was angry hipsters scream Jack White kills puppies and slams cars in wake of Jack White leaving show early. And I'm sitting there and we're trying to figure out what's going on and what to do if we stay, if we don't. It's looking more and more grim. Michael J. Fox leaves and someone says, "Is that Michael J. Fox?" And then someone else said, "Is Michael J. Fox the reason why Jack White's leaving?" And I said, "No, we're just going to cut that rumor. I'm going to officially put my foot down. This is one of the few moments when I can change the course of history." Nope, that's not what anybody said. And of course, the roadies start coming out and they're dressed as like pirates and stuff. It was really bizarre. And yeah, because Jack White's quite the strange showman. And my friend was beside himself and actually refused to get out of his seat. So when the ushers are coming over and they're trying to pull him out, I ducked around them and I went to the front and there was a bunch of ushers talking. And I said to them, like, "Do you mind me asking what happened?" And one of them turned to me and says, he didn't like that they weren't clapping. He said, "I don't know what to do. I can't make them clap. I can't make people clap." And I remember we're walking out and I'm pissed and somebody elbows me and says, "Oh, it's just part of the show. It's showmanship," or whatever. I was upset because I went from normal seats to no seats to fighting tooth and nail to claw my way back into that show. First of luck, better seats than I could ever afford, only to discover that he was unhappy with us. And as a performer, the piece that really hurts me is that it was a sold out show at Radio City Music Hall. Sold out. Now, the thought of playing a sold out show at Radio City Music Hall is the dream that people love you enough and love your material and connect with what you make and you as an artist enough to, again, for the fellow sitting next to us, $1,000 a seat. And I think at one point I actually sat with my friend and did the math. I took the number of songs that he did and divided it and figured out how much that guy paid per song that night.
Yeah.
Which, because I'm terrible at math, I do not remember. But my response would have been, if they're not clapping enough in the way that I want them to, then I'm the one that needs to figure out what's going on. And again, even from our conversation before, the audience wants you to succeed. They want you to do well. So I felt like he turned his back on a Full House. And to this day, I still won't listen to his stuff anymore. I respect him. I think he's a great artist, but I don't know. I just got turned off by the whole thing.
Did read a little while back that he doesn't like or maybe doesn't even allow people to have their phones out taking pictures while he's performing.
I thought things were happening real fast, as things do when they're happening. But certainly it did seem like whoever was taking pictures of him was part of the catalyst for him to storm off. Which Neil Young, I saw Neil Young at, God, where was it? It's escaping me. It'll come back to me as soon as we're not live. But it was one of his full acoustic sets. And I loved, he set up the entire stage. It looked like his living room. There was probably about 30 guitars, a pump organ, a piano, and a cigar store Native American statue behind him. And he would just tell stories and wander back and forth. He'd grab a guitar. He'd explain why he liked the guitar. But he asked us not to take pictures. And at one point he says, there's nothing, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, it's nothing more disappointing than looking out into the audience and seeing all of your dumb faces reflected back from the light from your phone as you're taking pictures of me. He probably didn't say dumb, but that was the subtext. And I do understand, I was listening to something earlier today that there's a phenomenon in shows now where if there's a TikTok trending song, that influencers will go only for the 10-second clip of the song so they can film themselves enjoying the show and just kind of get bored and hang out on their phones the whole rest of the show. And certainly as a performer, I would probably be alarmed by that if that was my experience.
Yeah.
That being said, you're Neil Young, you're Jack White. People are coming, they might want to take a picture to remember it. Again, when you reach a certain stratosphere, you're allowed to do what you want. But certainly with Jack White, it has impacted my ability to appreciate his work. Again, still respect him, still think he's a great artist, but again, I was clapping.
You were trying.
Oh, God. I don't think I had ever gone into a show more enthusiastic than that moment. For me, I was just, I don't know, I could barely talk the next day. I was screaming so loud. I was happy to be there.
You know, what's interesting, Victor, is I don't do TikTok or anything. And I took my wife and I took my daughter this past Friday to see this guy, Maddox Batson.
Okay.
He's a country kid. He's 16 years old. And there are lots of young kids there and stuff, and some older people. And I did not understand why during certain songs there were, because we were right up close to the stage, they were filming themselves while he was playing just as you've just described. God, why the heck are they doing that? But now I know.
Oh, it's funny. I was about to say, I haven't seen it live. So for all I know, misinformation or AI or something. And it's nice to know that I said something on your podcast that you could corroborate that it is true. I am on TikTok. I do listen. I do think that it's important as a performer to see what's going on, even if it's not something that you want to emulate or can emulate. But I'll frequently hear a song that's trending, and I play a specific style of music, and I'm limited by my range and the way that I play things. And I don't play things the way that they are written, to which I go back to a Dylan quote where he said, I never play my songs the same way twice because I can neither remember nor am I good enough to play them the same way over and over again. But I'll listen to a song and I'll go, oh, that's really neat. Let me try to figure out if I can cover that. And then I'll listen to the full song. And the part that the internet distills is the best part of the song. But it's hard to create thinking about that one snapshot of a moment. What's the one line in your song that's going to be the one that trends and goes viral?
Yeah.
And of course, as performers, we all want that. But it is interesting looking at the other side of the mirror, that there are people there just to appreciate the one moment. I guess the grass is always greener, you know?
That's interesting.
And then there's Jack White leaving, which again, deeply upsets me.
Like I was telling you, I saw Jack White last year at this thing called Riot Fest in Chicago. So it's a lot of punk bands and older punk bands and hodgepodge of bands sort of too, because like the Beach Boys were there just randomly. But yeah, he played like 13 songs, and he didn't play the one song I was looking forward to, the Archbishop Harold Holmes. And you know, it was right before Weezer was coming on, so I was like, it's a festival, it'll probably be a shortened thing. And so I was a teensy weensy bit disappointed because of the song he didn't play. Other than that, I'd been trying to see him for a number of years. One time he had broken his finger and he had to cancel the show. And there was some other time where it was like impossible to get a ticket. And that was before StubHub was around. I was grateful to see him, but it was a little bit on the shorter side. But what are you going to do?
My brother caught him at, I think it was the Governor's Ball, and he texted me and he said, this is really going to bother you. And I said, what? And he said, in between some of the songs, he said, you guys better be clapping because I'll take off. It's almost like he used my show to establish a precedent of, if you guys don't clap enough, I'm going to leave. And I probably sent a slew of obscenities. That makes sense for the festival. I've also caught artists who have had to do truncated sets.
Right.
And again, I'm sure I wish the experience didn't happen because I really respect and enjoy his material. But again, I felt so rejected by it that I was just like, I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah, it was too much. We could move on, if you want, Victor, to your most surprising, which was this Conor Oberst. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah. I love Conor Oberst. I've seen him a number of times. I've caught him quite a bit with his main project, which is Bright Eyes. I also saw him at Carnegie Hall doing a solo set. I always enjoy his work. But I caught him, what was it? I wrote the year down because I thought ahead. It was 2008, November 8th, 2008. And that was towards the conception of him and the Mystic Valley Band. Bright Eyes had stopped playing music together. I think one of them had kids and, just life does its thing. And he formed this solo project. And that first solo album is still one of my all-time favorite albums. And it really did feel like there's many, especially with, I listened to the Alan Lomax collection of, I think it's called the Smithsonian, it's all of the, they're all dead is what I'm trying to stammer out here. That usually with the type of music that I listen to, I am rarely at the forefront of when an artist does something. I'm usually sort of studying the back end, which is incredibly valuable, I think, as a performer. as an artist. I often talk to people, and especially with guitar playing, they say like, oh, I want to play this guitar that so-and-so played in 1966. And my response is like, I want to know what Clapton's playing now. Like after years of amps exploding and feedback, what's the thing that's the most sort of time-tested and true thing that you want to do now? And that's why I think having artists like Dylan who are still around, that we're so lucky to be able to kind of study not just, how they function, but how to map out sustained creativity with any of these artists that have staying power. But yeah, so Conor Oberst, it was around when the first album came out. And one thing that I really loved was that there was a song that came out on the next album called, I think it's called 10 Women. And he introduced the song by saying, this is something that I'm working on. I hope you guys like it. And that's always a treat when you get to hear someone of that caliber get to be, again, at the forefront of it. You get to hear it before it's recorded and refined and polished. But in rock and roll fashion, he was socking down Bud Lights and he was eating those tiny little plastic things of pudding where you peel the lid off. He was really into it. He has this one song about New York City that he played. That's a really quick, short song. And he kind of looks up and he says, oh, there's a disco ball here. He says, oh, that's cool. And he says, I am not playing until this thing is running. And there was a pause because clearly somebody backstage was going like, oh my God, he's not kidding. And they got it running pretty fast, I'm going to say. And then he pushed forward and he was doing I think at one point he ran across all the amps. He was really having fun that night. And that was a real joy to catch. And he played Kodachrome towards the end of the set, which I don't think he had been doing. That was a real treat to catch too. It's always great when you see an artist like that cover someone else's stuff, because even with shows live with artists that you don't know, I think it's important for acts at every tier to try to include a cover because it allows the audience to judge what you're doing against something that they know and understand and something that's not yours. And you can show like how you do it, what's your take on it. And a lot of times you'll discover that artists have range that you didn't realize that they had because they're performing their own material. But yeah, that was a great show.
I was going to ask you, Victor, I read he's like a big Cure fan. Did he ever do covers of The Cure?
Not that I know of. I should have my brother here. He knows him like I know Dylan's stuff. I'm sure he could tell you every set list.
Hi, this is Charles Zona, and we're glad you are enjoying this episode of Seeing Them Live. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please fill out the form on our website at seeingthemlive.com. Also, if you like the show, please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And now, back to the show. So, Victor, those are your stories, and I want to move into your music. And so I didn't know if you wanted to start maybe with your guitar building.
Yeah, I bill under Victor V. Gurbo. Vocal is my middle name. It's my mom's last name. I guess technically it's two last names.
Yeah, because the reason why I wanted to start there too was because you learned how to make guitars because you had ordered a guitar prior to you going to play the 2013 Battle of the Boroughs, right? And you were like, I want the guitar made by, and I forget the guy's name.
His name is Rick Kelly, and I discovered him actually because Bob Dylan was playing one of his guitars, and Dylan did a run of shows, and of course, I forgot to look up the years because I can't retain any of that information. My brain's running on Windows 95, so there's not a lot of room in there. But actually, it was the run of shows where I pulled that poster down on my way out. So he did this run of shows at Terminal 5, and every night I booked, I think he was there, it was like 4 or 5 shows. I got tickets for every single one, and I brought friends to all of them but the last one. And like a crazy person, I got there way too early. And I was at the front because it was standing room, and most of his shows before that and after, at least the ones that I could attend, were seated. So it was a nice opportunity to get close. And Dylan mostly plays keys now, but on occasion for like 1 or 2 songs, he'll pull out a guitar. And he was playing the Stratocaster. And when I got close, I saw that there was an eagle head carved into the Strat horn. And you could also see all the wood knots on the guitar. And I thought like, oh, that's really cool. And serendipity, I'm searching Craigslist because that's what I do. There was a small window when I was starting to get into guitar repair and stuff where I was searching Craigslist for busted guitars and stuff like that. I can tell you everything up there. And I found this guy. It was for something like $8,000. He was selling one of Bob Dylan's rejected guitars. So I called him like I could ever afford an $8,000 guitar. I couldn't then, I can't now, and I don't see that in my future. Nor should I. But so I called him up on the phone and I said like, well, how did you get this? And he said, yes, well, Bob Dylan purchased 3 guitars from Rick Kelly Kelly at Carmine Street Guitars, and he kept two and he sent one back. And I bought it. And he said, this is what I'm selling it for. And I said, oh, well, I really want to, authenticate what you're saying. Can you tell me where to find the shop? And he gave me the information. I went down and Rick Kelly's sitting in the shop and there's two other older guys there. And I walk in and I explain how I found him. And he said, $8,000, that's insane. And I said, well, it's Bob Dylan. And he goes, kid, if you like Bob that much, I'll build you a guitar. I'll mail it to him. I'll have him lick the tuners and I'll have him mail it back. And I said, are you serious? Is that an option? And they all burst out laughing. And so I ordered one. Dylan wanted one of his guitars because he makes guitars out of the remains of the bones of New York City. When a building's being torn down, he will go and pull the support beams out of the dumpsters and he'll make guitars out of them, which is absolutely brilliant because the process of making most modern guitars is you dry the wood. Basically, you start a fire, you put the wood on top of it, and you dry it out, which there is an argument for. Of course, everything is subjective. I saw somebody online made a guitar out of cement and proved that, pickups don't matter. I'm sorry, that the body of the guitar doesn't matter. And also, this will rope in Jack White, that Jack White's guitar that he played with the White Stripes is made out of plastic. So the front and back are made out of the weird fiberglass material, and there's a maple strip running down the middle of the guitar. And that guitar, in his hands, that thing sounds absolutely fantastic. So the reason why people gravitate towards vintage guitars is 9 times out of 10, they sound better. And that's because the wood has actually aged and solidified in a way that it just sounds great. And it's just something that you just can't replicate. And he's making guitars out of 100-year-old wood. So it's cheating. They do sound fantastic. And apparently Dylan was just amused by the fact because his guitar was made out of Chumley's bar. He thought it was funny that he could have spilled a beer on his guitar in the 60s. And the necks are made out of the remains of the Chelsea Hotel. So as someone who studies both the music and the writing that came out of that period, Dylan Thomas, they all hung out at Chumley's. And he said sometimes he gets pieces of wood with stuff carved on them, that people were just kind of hanging out and doing stuff. So I ordered one. And he said it would take about 6 months. I did the math, and it was around from getting accepted that my phase of the contest was going to happen. And it took him 4.5 years to put the guitar together. He's very back-ordered, and I think that he was ambitious with how quickly he thought that he could finish it. And if you go online and look at forums regarding his work, it's mostly people complaining that they haven't gotten their guitar, and somebody posts a picture as soon as it's done, and all of a sudden people are lighting up and they're going crazy. But, I kept going by his shop, and he would always, every time I'd come, he'd say, oh yeah, come back at the end of the month. That's just in the spray booth. It'll be done. Just trying to get rid of me. And I'd come back at the end of the month. And every single time, as I kept coming back, I realized that my father was a contract worker for a while, and he had all these tools in the basement where he lives. And I realized, oh my God, I could do this. So I built my own guitar for the contest, which we ended up winning, which was a lot of fun. There was a brief window where there was a company that, because I like Jack White so much, that bought the patent to make. So he plays, it's an old company called Airline that made these bizarre guitars using a fiberglass top and bottom, wood beam that runs down the middle. So it's a sort of semi-hollow body, but there's a very weird tone that comes out of the plastic. So it's really something that's, I would argue, a challenge to replicate. And the company did a Kickstarter thing and then started, and they advertised it as an intermediate level project. I think that also was a generous statement. I made every possible mistake you could make putting that thing together. I replaced everything. I wired it all by hand. And since then, I've been making my own. I do the same thing as Rick Kelly. I find old pieces of wood and I recycle them. And I toyed with the idea of doing it more professionally, but at the end of the day, I decided that I wanted to focus more on playing music and doing my day job, because just like with any art project, it takes your full attention and full time to make it into something that really makes you enough money to do it all the time. But I still make them. I make about 4 or 5 a year, and I'll sell them privately, or I'll give them to a friend who's going out on a tour or something like that. And it's a lot of fun. I encourage everyone who plays music to, within reason, take your guitar apart, see how it works, because I've definitely felt like that I've become a better player from understanding what goes into the instrument that I play. And I've certainly found ways to modify things I can show you, although I believe this is all audio, so there's no point.
You have a whole bunch of guitars hanging behind you.
Oh, yeah. I call it my wall of shame.
But Victor, see, you make this guitar, and this is like 2013, right? And you're going to this Battle of the Boroughs, NER, green bass, It sounded like where I looked into this, and I don't know how much of this is true, but it's a street level, like broadcast studio in New York City.
Yeah, NPR does a lot of their events, and I think a lot of their recording over there. I actually saw Conor Oberst there be interviewed and do a couple of songs. Yeah, a lot of great artists go through there.
Because it looks like it holds like maybe 250 people or so. So it's a small little spot.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And you guys won Best Band in Brooklyn.
Yeah, which is all subjective, but for a brief moment, I could say that was the case. Yeah, so the way that the contest worked is they had every borough compete. So they had one day of playing music with judges. And then after that, 5 bands were picked and you could vote online. And then all the boroughs competed at the end. So we won Best Band in Brooklyn, which really surprised me at the time because there were groups that we were competing with that had a lot more followers online than we did. So it certainly was a sort of grassroots operation. And on the final phase of the contest, we got effectively second place. We had the most votes in the room, but the Villalobos brothers from Manhattan, they won the contest, and they are another band absolutely worth checking out. We did a show with them, I think the following year at the Mercury Lounge. But yeah, it was because of that show, we were invited to play the BAM Cafe, which is at Brooklyn Academy of Music. They were doing this series. They have this smaller stage, and then they would invite more emerging artists to come play. And that was up until Carnegie Hall. I would say that was probably the biggest show that we did. But yeah, that was a fun time.
Because I was going to ask you, Victor, I was trying to piece together your recordings and such that are available. And so, like, this Battle of the Boroughs is 2013. And then do you release then this Victor V. Gurbo and Company in 2017? So was there anything in between there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we've been consistently doing shows in New York City. Since then, the band lineup has changed a bit. I still have the keyboard player that I worked with for that show. For some reason, he still tolerates me, and thank God that he does. He's incredibly talented. His name is Jason Laney, and he has a couple of great projects. He also plays with Mad Meg. He also plays with the band Scotia Rose. Very talented, and he's been very helpful in arranging the material for a full band. But we've done every venue under the sun here, and we were toying with the idea of recording. We changed the itinerary around, did a couple more shows. We put that album out, and then did a couple more shows. And then the real white whale that ended up actually coming into being was, it was in 2019, an artist approached me, Phil Robinson. He said, I work with Roomful of Sky. I want to book a show at Carnegie Hall. And I said, oh, you're out of your mind. I said, there's no way that they're going to do that. And he said, like, can I send your stuff over? Can I put you in front of the pitch? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead. It's not going to work, but you can do it. And he comes back to me and he says, yeah, we got approved to do it. To which I said, okay, that's equally as insane. Something's going to go wrong. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And then the show got knocked out of rotation. To which I said, well, of course it wasn't going to happen. And keep so much joy being so negative. You've willed this into being. And then as soon as the restrictions were lifted, that was the next big show that we did. I mean, there was certainly, we played the Highline Ballroom. We played a number of larger tier venues in between, back in ye olden days during the contest and now. But that certainly was sort of the crown jewel so far. And because of that, we ended up doing a small stint in Austin, Texas. And once we came back during the pandemic, I recorded quite a bit with another Bay Ridge artist by the name of Mark Caserta. And he reached out to me at the start of when things started going bad. And he said, listen, I never actually played with him. I met him on Craigslist. I traded a guitar that I made for an old guitar of his. He had an old Dan Electro guitar that I'd always had my eye on. And so he contacts me and we did a swap and we kept in touch. I listened to some of his projects. I'd go out to some of his shows. And as soon as the lockdown started, he said, Victor, you know, all of my projects, all the songwriters that I work with, they're not doing anything right now. If you send me a recording, I'll play along to it. I just want to feel like I'm performing with another artist. And I was in the process of slamming my head against the wall, being in isolation. And I said, oh, that's probably a better use of my time. So I recorded something on my iPhone and I sent it to him and he bounced it back. And by the end of the lockdown, we had over 100 recordings that we were sitting on. And then there was something called the NPR Public Song Contest. They were looking for public domain covers of songs that had just exited copyright and were now available for artists to use freely. And we had a version of A Pretty Girl Is Like a Melody, which is an Irving Berlin tune. And we sent that in and Paul Cavalcante played it on New Standards. And we took stock and went, okay, maybe we got something there. And we Mark mixed, I should say, which he's gotten very good at working with the weird way that I record things and the weird way that I exist. And we ended up putting out an album on vinyl of a selection of the songs that we created during that period. And we're still going through them, and we're probably going to do another volume sometime soon. But now I've started doing shows with him, so it's just a duo. It's just me on acoustic guitar. I have an omnichord now, so I can get a little weird with things. And Mark plays guitar, plays mandolin, he plays bass, he plays everything. So the two of us have started doing smaller shows, and we're toying with the idea of taking it out of state. It's much easier to take 2 people on the road than it is to take 5. I got to find shows that pay a little bit more to bring the whole gang out.
Was that Outrun the Invisible Man that has that song on there?
Yeah. Well, that's the name of the album. I'm a big fan of not naming your album after a song because I feel like it directs people too much. So listen to this one. This is the best one. And I want people to make their own decisions on which is the best one, because the second song on the album, which is Dreaming and Dancing, I thought that was the strongest song on the record. And we made an ad using that. And then once we started sending it to radio stations, they played a number of songs that I wasn't expecting anyone to click with. I thought that they were more filler. And I'm glad that I didn't name it after that, because now we do those songs more.
Because I was also listening to the song and I watched the video, The Water is Wide, which features Mark. How do you say his last name?
It's Caserta.
Yeah. And then Michelle.
Cusa.
That's a really cool song. And the video is interesting too, because you guys are like sitting in a bathtub with water in it.
Well, it's funny. That's an old folk song. I love taking old songs and sort of doing my own spin on them. And Mark worked with Michelle for a number of years before him and I hooked up. And it was during the release of the last album, we had a couple of tracks that we were playing with, and we'll use sort of the bones of whatever we did during the pandemic, but we'll add some stuff and we'll clean them up. And if there's a part that didn't quite work, at that point, I had the long COVID beard and was going insane. So there's certainly things that need tweaking. And he said, this would sound really cool if we brought on another vocalist. I know Michelle, please, can we take her? And I said, absolutely, if she wants to, by all means. And so we did this song, and she gives us a call and says that she has this idea for a video about us assembling paper boats and pushing them back and forth. And the whole story is told through that. And I said, well, that sounds like a big project. How do you want to do that? And he goes, oh, if we just have a bathtub, we can pull it off. But it's okay. I said, do we need it? No, let's just get our iPhones and jump into it. And then I said, what is Mark going to do? He said, we'll just have him sit in the tub. But yeah, I think it's a great example. It was a lot of fun to do. Also, that water was really cold. We have some B-roll stuff of us trying to get adjusted. And good Lord, I went first and I said, this is bad. Mark said, I can't be that bad. And it was as bad as you could imagine. But one must suffer for their art, as they say.
Yeah.
And I think most of these tracks are done on GarageBand, and I'm sure a professional recording engineer will scoff at them, but most people listen to stuff on, these headphones that I have right now, or through the speaker of their iPhones. Yes, there is a level of perfectionism that one can get, but you really need a professional for. But I think if anyone's ever thought about recording their stuff, every laptop now has a built-in version of whatever software.
Because when I look at your songs like on iTunes, you do in parentheses say it's a home recording, which I listen to. And yet, like you were saying to me, it sounds great. I can't tell the difference, listening to it casually. I guess my point is if you're putting it out there, I don't want to say as a warning, but where it was created. But again, it sounds perfect. It sounds wonderful.
I chatted quite a bit with Mark about if that was the right thing to do, because I do think there are some people, I talked with a couple of people that run playlists or whatever, and they don't even bother listening, and they just say, oh, it's a home recording. That's not for us. But on the other side of the coin, there's a whole narrative behind it. And I think a good piece of art should exist in and of itself, that the narrative behind it can help you appreciate it. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't need it to enjoy it. And certainly for shopping that record around, there was a huge story behind how it was made and what it is. And it gave people on radio stations something to talk about in addition to what the subject matter was. So I don't regret giving that warning, as you put it. But I think in the face of a lot of very mechanical, sanitized material, there was something very pleasant about giving people something that, like, yeah, the microphone get tapped once or twice. You'll hear, there's one moment when we're recording a song called I Missed You All the Same. I always, when I record, I give Mark so instead of like just waiting for the moment, I'll record the dead air just so he has everything that he could work with if he wants to use it in the space. And I was playing harmonica and I was just doing it at the tail end. So I pressed record and I was listening to the song and I was trying to kind of make some mental notes. And I realized, oh my God, the part that I wanted to record is coming up. So I clicked open the harmonica case and started playing. And the click's still in the recording. And I told him, like, oh, the click. I said, no, it's real, leave it in. So, I mean, that's part of it, is that these are response to being isolated. It's an attempt to be human in a time when we were separated by screens. And it's sort of intentionally released as something that's organic in an era when everything is now a string of code.
To me, when I read that, I did not really think about the quality. It was almost that I can picture you at home, not even knowing what your home looks like. But like you were just saying, it's a realistic image, you and the musicians playing almost live, which is your latest album recording.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it being real. And a lot of my favorite tracks, especially from the 1960s, they're live. To me, it's supposed to be a capture of a performance. And I know I also love the Sgt. Pepper album, so I'm aware that a lot can be created in the studio and there's magic, but both things can be true at the same time. And one thing that I really love about Bob Dylan is that he records this stuff. All of his albums are live. I enjoy playing live. I find it very satisfying. And we were lucky enough that when we did this show at Cafe Wah, that the sound engineer could offer us the multi-track. So I immediately said to Mark, like, all right, let's decode this, figure out what the tracks mean, and let's see if we can slap it together. And I think one of our best shows to date, and I'm really happy with how it sounded. I think 2 songs are present from our 2017 album. Those songs have changed a bit. One of the things that I love about playing music is that the songs don't have to be static. All art does not have to be static, but playing music, you get to rewrite your material. I really enjoy playing songs live because it allows me to explore them and to feel out the poetry of them. And again, the great thing is that you can change it the next time you play it.
Yeah.
And this is a snapshot of how we sound now. And I'm happy that I was able to get it out there for people to listen to on streaming.
Yeah, it came out March 11th, 2026 here, and called Gurbo and Company Live 2025.
Yep, not my most creative title, but it does get the job done.
You know what it's about, right?
I'm not misleading anyone.
It's got 8 songs on it, Victor, 2 covers, or maybe there's one I didn't recognize as a cover.
No, there's 2. Rollin' and Tumblin' is a cover. Our arrangement is different, but Bob Dylan did a version of that on Time Out of Mind, which really stuck with me. So it's geared after his version with some changes to the structure. And we do a cover of the Folsom Prison Blues, which we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what covers to do. And we want to be able to play something that anybody might know, that someone who's from Gen Z might be able to pick up and someone who's a baby boomer might be able to listen to and know the song. And Johnny Cash is one of those artists. I don't know anybody that hates Johnny Cash, even people that don't like country music. There's just something so cool about him and his story and his persona and everything. And that one just clicked. And my lead guitarist, he was a session musician at the China Club in the 1980s, and he's a real shredder. And he's fun to have in there because I love working with artists who have their own personality and will pull the songs in a way that I'm not expecting or thinking. Because if you leave me by myself, I'm going to sound like the physical limitations of my playing and also the conceptual limitations of my playing. And having someone involved who is going to do something that I, in my wildest dreams, would never think of incorporating. On occasion, I'll have to say, okay, no, that's too much the antithesis of my vision for this. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to get something that, again, playing with a band, it's a communal piece of art. I write the songs, I write the chord structures to them, I write the melodies, but the guys are the ones that really make it into something special. And again, everybody knew that song. Nobody hated it because, again, I'm sure there's somebody out there, but I challenge you to find me somebody that just hates Johnny Cash.
I have not run across anyone.
I've found people that don't like the Beatles. Those are fighting words, but at the same time, I get that even a little bit more. You got a photograph of him flipping off the camera. You got a picture of him eating birthday cake high in a bush. I mean, he's a fun guy.
So for the album, so you guys obviously planned that, right, at this Cafe Wah?
Oh, yeah, once we knew it was happening. Yeah, and I did my best not to remind everyone that it was being recorded because I knew that would mentally program everyone to.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah. Because I do the same thing. It's that old adage, if you ever take a picture of somebody, like, it's amazing once you say smile, instinctively don't look like you half the time.
Correct.
So I wanted to catch that. I wanted them to be prepared enough, which, we were, but at the same time, it still needed to be a live show, and I didn't want to psych nobody out.
That's a good strategy. Right now, yeah, we're going to play Burning the Manor Down. Let's go. Mother Superior jumped the gun, but all in all it was a little fun that ripped the buttons clean off of your coat. She warned you not to let me in, and that to do so was embodied sin. I tell you, she warned you not to gloat. And how come there's gonna be no water? You should have locked the doors, should have told your daughters, but well, they'll know by now. The good book told them I'd come and you should hit the ground and start running before I face the curtain with a vow. Baby, light the hen house, we'll burn the bastard down, and sit and wait and watch till the ashes hit the ground. Well, howl like a Valia, for there will be no words. The sound of the burning mansion's gonna form the walls in dirt. Together at the dining table, and I told you every single fable and tried to prove that this world is utterly flat. But honey, baby, the table's round and your mama thinks you're Dixie bound, and I got a room here, can you imagine that? Oh, listen, heavenly Valia, I've got something for you. I hand it over, but you gotta close your eyes. Records in the jukebox turn, and the pretty little lines they burn long after the melody is gone. Baby, light the hen house, we're gonna burn the bastard down. Sit and wait and watch till the ashes hit the ground. We'll howl like a Valia, for there will be no words. The sound of the burning mansion's gonna form the walls in dirt. Please light up a kettle, and I'll have a cup before I leave this place. Sanity is never learning. The seasons change and the wheels keep turning. You can see it in the lines of your face. Well, if there's anything you love, it'll be the first thing I show. Deep into the flames and rising ash. Hank is gone and the king is dead, and the radio's hanging on by threads. So if you feel something burning, don't you be rash. We're gonna burn that fucker down. The melody will rise and fall, but never make a sound. Build trouble, toil, you'll never find an end. As soon as you rise on like a gun. Oh,
Thank you.
How do people reach you? Is there anything you'd like to plug or talk about before we sign off?
Of course, yeah. We have this new record out, and if you like this track, please, you can follow us on social media. Tag is Victor V. Gurbo on everything. And also, if you like the story about our home recording sessions, we still have copies on vinyl for sale, which you can pick up on our website. And yeah, I got shows coming up. I'm in the process of having a number of stuff booked, which will be available on my website shortly.
Victor, thanks again for being on the podcast. And yeah, everybody check out Gurbo and Company Live 2025.
Thank you so much for having me here.
That's a wrap for our show. I want to thank today's guests for sharing their concert stories with us. Make sure to check out our show notes at seeingthemlive.com for links to websites, photos, and other artifacts mentioned in the show. I also want to thank my producer, Doug Florzak. The theme music for the show was composed by Doug and is featured on his album, Flagstone. If you have a concert story you'd like to share on our podcast, please visit our website and click on Become a Guest in the main menu. Then fill out the form and click the Submit button. If you seem like a good fit for the show, we'll contact you via email. I guess it's time to head for the exits. We'll see you next time on Seeing Them Live.